first film to ever gross over $1 million at the box office in 1975, Jaws scared audience from taking a dip in the ocean in fear of suffering the same fate as some of the shark's victims in the film. One of the rarest of horror films to be nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, this classic Steven Spielberg film has etched itself into the public conscious with its story and characters along with our fascination and fear of sharks. And let's not forget the iconic theme by the ever great John Williams that I'm sure we've all used once or twice in a swimming pool to scare somebody. Now, of course, if you have watched some of the specials from Shark Week broadcasted on the Discovery Channel, you could pretty much surmise that this film is pretty false in how real sharks really behave. In fact, Peter Blanchard, one of the screenwriters who also wrote the best-selling book that this film is based off, has stated that had he learned more about sharks, he may not have written the story in the first place. However, every few years there would be news coverage of shark attacks that happen along the coastlines during the summer somewhere around the world. While sharks do not see us as part of their regular diet and they largely attack because of confusion, the premise of the story is based on a real-life incident. In December of 1916, 4 people were killed by a single shark off the New Jersey shore. It was the first instance of widespread news coverage of shark attacks, and that pretty much started our interest and anxiety with the terrifying-looking creatures. Even now, after we have learned so much about them, there are still people out there who still see them as nothing more than mindless man-eating monsters. So is it really wrong to portray a shark like that? Well, the thing about this movie is that while the shark is the main focus and something that is always constantly on the minds of the characters, by the end, I've gotten to enjoy spending time with the 3 main characters. Rory Schneider plays Chief Martin Brody, an ex-cop from the city who hopes to live a quiet and peaceful life with his family on Amity Island, even though he hates the water. But all that changes when a shark comes into town at the worst time imaginable, killing 2 people just when the town is getting ready to welcome thousands of vacationers to enjoy the beaches and the ocean. Fighting against the town mayor, played by Murray Hamilton, as well as much of the town who kept him from closing the beaches because of their own ignorance and fears of their survival, the chief finds help from marine biologist and shark expert Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss, and an old sea dog named Quint, played by Robert Shaw. Together they have to learn to work efficiently in order to take down the shark before they become its next meal. These 3 characters are great and fun to watch together. Brody is portrayed as a man who wants to do the best thing he believes needed to be done. Even with many people breathing down his neck about the shark situation and blocking much of his proposal that would hinder the summer operations, he does his best to make the best effort he can make to make sure that the shark doesn't take another victim. And we see just how frustrating he can get, as well as being depressed when he is confronted by the mother of the boy who was killed by the shark. In her grief, she accused Brody of letting people swim even after he knew that it was dangerous to do so. Even though it was the mayor who twisted his arm to open up the beaches, he still took full responsibility for what happened. And from that we get a touching scene between him and his youngest son that shows that side that I love about him, the everyday family man who gets caught up in an extraordinary situation. Hooper is the youngest of the 3, but is the most knowledgeable when it comes to book smarts, but he does have his experience with the ocean. He does come off as brash with his words that can be as sharp as a shark's teeth, but that just shows just how passionate he feels about them. While he does show great love for them, he also knows that they should command our fear and respect for them because they are the perfect hunters. He gets along with Brody well enough, but it's with Quint that he constantly butts heads with. In an iconic performance, Quint is definitely the most memorable of the 3 with his eccentricity and does represent the street smarts, or in this case, sea smarts. While he may seem unbearable to work with as he feels like he thinks too highly of himself, he does have that sense of humor that is quite entertaining to watch. He is impulsive with his actions and doesn't take the feelings of others into consideration, but he is willing to listen to others when the situation calls for it. But the one thing that makes him such an iconic figure in cinematic history is his story about his time on the USS Indianapolis during World War II. Just the way Shaw delivers his story has a way of grabbing your attention and not letting go until he delivers the punchline. He sounds haunted by the event with how he describes being out in the middle of nowhere while people around him dying by the hour. It is such an excellent scene that gives the theme of the film, the fear of a creature that has crafted itself through millions of years of evolution into a killing machine. Speaking of which, the shark itself is hardly ever seen throughout the film, only about a second or two every once in a while. Spielberg demanded that the shark should be invisible to the audience until halfway through the film because he wanted them to fill in with their imagination as a way to engage them with the film. It plays with the idea of our fear of the unknown, which we didn't know much about the species at the time. Not only that, but because they are using a mechanical shark, and the fact that it was a pain in the ass to use as it never worked half the time, they kept it much in the water to keep itself from being scrutinized to realism, so it sells the illusion much better than just showing the shark repeatedly and increasing the chances of ruining the magic. After 40 years, it still looks as great and believable. The music by John Williams is the most essential element that gives this film its identity. The main theme is simple yet sinister and primal feeling that, as the composer said himself, represents a killer whose only reason for killing is to feed, nothing else. There's nothing really nefarious about it, but there is something scary when you can't even reason with something that is following its instincts and it is a powerful creature that can easily kill with one bite. Each scene knows what cues of music is needed to make it engaging, from the table scene where we see a melancholic Brody being cheered up by his son, to the first standoff with the shark out on the orca, to the chasing of the barrels where it gives an adventurous and triumphant tune, until they lost it and it just teeters off. It knows what it wants to emphasize without taking over the scene, and it turns the film into an experience, a power that very few films ever achieve. I think it's pretty obvious at this point that I really love this film. However, funny enough, while I have watched this movie every once in a while for years and even watched and discussed it during a film class, I actually never really fell in love with it until very recently. I knew that I've liked it, but I never really embraced it. I kinda kept myself a distance away from it because I must have felt that the premise was a bit silly and even found Quint a bit too much to take. But recently, having watched it, I really was taken in by it, and I've changed my mind where I think it's one of those few films that comes close to achieving perfection. Jaws is a hell of a ride, and while the way the shark behaves may be a bit too bothersome to watch and the film did color people's perceptions of sharks as man-eaters, as long as we can tell the difference with fiction and real life, then we can be able to appreciate a work of art and still find fascination and beauty with the real sharks that are essential to ocean life. There is no doubt that this movie is going to stay with us for a very long time as long as we still hold on to those interests in sharks. It is a fun, adventurous thriller with excellent characters and a formidable film that I have no doubt will continue to hold my attention every time I watch it.